This is a webinar wrap-up from January 27th. This is a webinar wrap-up from January 17th, 2022, where we had a discussion on low-tech AAC and the pros and cons. This is a webinar wrap-up of a discussion we had on low-tech AAC, the pros and cons, on January 18th, 2022. This was facilitated by Brenda Del Monte and Sari Kinsella. Just a reminder, the Special Ed Technology Center is just one of the many Washington State's needs projects, and these are other projects and possible resources for you as a practitioner in the state of Washington. Our learning objectives today were about PECS, POD, and core vocabulary exchange system, and participants helped us come up with pros and cons of each. And we also touched at the very end on the difference between a robust low-tech communication system and visual supports. We started with the hardest part, and that was a discussion about hand over hand, when it's useful, how it's useful, and problems around that. There's a handout called The Problem with Hand Over Hand by Jane Farrell that we would love for you to explore. Many people talked about using hand over hand as only something that they do in the very beginning, and others talked about the battles of continuing hand over years and years of time and the detriments of that. We talked about why we use low-tech AAC. It's vocabulary that can be really motivating but situational. So you may have been studying something about the Winter Olympics that's not on your high or low-tech device, but you need the vocabulary for the discussion. It can be more budget friendly than an AAC high-tech system. It can be adapted to a variety of access methods. It's an excellent backup system to high-tech, and many times parents prefer it. Limitations include that often we don't have the right pictures printed, laminated, Velcroed, and that becomes difficult. One size doesn't always fit all, so if you've printed maybe a pod book for everyone in your class, maybe that doesn't actually work for someone's vision, someone's hearing. And that also depends on the skill level of the therapist, on their ability to adapt the access method to those strengths. Not having voice output can be a significant limitation, and when you add voice output to a picture, you can maintain attention for those who are not attending to low-tech systems. And we know that low-tech is not a prerequisite for high-tech, but we do know that a limitation to low-tech is that people often presume that that's step one. We reviewed picture exchange and PECS, and we separated them because the true picture exchange communication system is extensive. It has 7 phases, and professional training is required. The rest of us often use picture exchange more loosely, and there are autism internet modules that link to this slide on how to do PECS. In this discussion, we talked about how PECS is good for teaching positive communication behaviors, establishing the exchange of information, initiating, and often that's what the classroom's already doing, so you already have buy-in. Limitations is that lots of times we only use it for snack, and that we get stuck on I want. And sometimes it's that we have so many symbols we can't manage them, or not enough symbols to express what you want. Pragmatic organization, dynamic display, or the pod book has a lot of resources here and to learn about, and YouTube videos that Setsi has put together on pod. We talked about why we use pod. It can be used electronically, like on a Tobii or Grid 3. It's much more robust than I want. It's easy to model. There's no batteries to go dead on you. It's a great backup system, and it's systematic and consistent where you start on the first page and you move forward. Some of the limitations is that it relies on the student to initiate, but the adult to navigate. And turning pages and things like that are happening by the adult. Assembly can be time consuming and a little bit expensive. Customization can be challenging if you've already made a book and then you decide you want to add it, but there are ways around that. And it can be intimidating to staff. And again, this was just feedback from people on our webinar and what they had to say about it. The core vocabulary exchange system is a system that you buy. It's already printed out. It's in Boardmaker Symbols and has several levels. I think 3 levels last time I looked. And it has kind of a core board there at the bottom, a flip book for a fringe vocabulary, and it has a first then for visual schedules built in. You do have to do your own Velcroing. It was a great system that you can just buy and you don't need a laminator, you don't need a color printer and all that kind of thing. It definitely touches on core and gets way beyond I want. The tabs can help with navigation in the book. And it does come with some sensory diet kind of pieces about what might meet needs and a visual schedule. The limitation is everything does need Velcroing. The emotion photos are not culturally sensitive, although they could be customized. There's not a lot of space for personalization within the core board. And you would have to have some significant fine motor skills to pick off the pieces and put them on. And of course, anything with pieces can be lost, so it's something to consider. We just wanted a reminder that all these systems are robust language systems and not visual schedules. And sometimes teachers will say, oh yeah, they have low-tech AAC, but it's actually a visual schedule. And one of the comments made that was helpful was like, a visual schedule is set up by the teacher, low-tech communication is communicated by the student. So often things on the schedule is something that a student would never communicate because it's not their preferred item. So just making sure that we are accountable to our field and to language itself by delineating the difference between visual schedules and AAC. There's more resources to explore and links, and so please check out this slide deck as well as handouts in the folder that you can link to on this video. That's a recap.